Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Leadership Alliance Virtual Professional Development Series Wednesday workshop on strategies for sharing your lived experiences. My name is Jane Indorf, and I'm the manager of undergraduate and graduate programs with the Leadership Alliance. Thank you, students, for submitting so many great questions ahead of today's session. They're really helpful for us in framing what we're going to talk about today. For those of you who are joining us live, please feel free to use the Q&A box to ask questions during today's session. And also, please go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat and make sure you select everyone. We really love to know who's on the call with us. So, let us know where you're tuning in from and what your major is. So during today's session, we'll be learning some best practices and tips for communicating your lived experiences in professional spaces, in particular for personal statements and statements of purpose, which are a significant part of the graduate school application. It can be challenging to write about yourself, your research interests, and how your unique lived experiences have shaped your professional interests and career goals. I know I personally have a hard time with that. So we hope that you will walk away today with some new strategies and a little more confidence in your ability to effectively and professionally communicate about who you are. It is my pleasure to briefly introduce today's speakers, who all have a lot of experience and much expertise in helping students to craft personal statements for research programs and graduate school applications. First, I'd like to introduce Mahnoor Ahmed, who's the Director for Student Recruitment and Engagement in the Office of Inclusion, Diversity, Anti-Racism, and Equity at the Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg School of Public Health. Mahnoor provides leadership for developing, managing, and supporting initiatives directed at promoting an inclusive student community. She's experienced in mentoring, advising, training, and leadership development with a focus on identity, belonging, and inclusion. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Elijah Bratton, who is the Program Manager for the Humanities and Social Sciences Scholars Program and also supports the Karsh STEM Scholars Program at Howard University. He has a PhD in Higher Education Leadership and Policy Studies from Howard University. His research interests center on programmatic infrastructure of HBCUs, or historically Black colleges and universities, honors colleges, and programs, as well as the lived experiences of the students who select these unique pathways. And we're also joined today by Dr. Chenere Ramsey, who you may recognize from our first conversation with the Doctoral Scholars session a couple weeks ago. Dr. Ramsey is a distinguished scholar and advocate for underrepresented groups in STEM. She's the first African-American woman to complete a traditional PhD in neuroscience at the Perelman School of Medicine at the University of Pennsylvania. She went on to found a nonprofit organization called Ripen the MeriSTEM that focuses on academic support and professional development for individuals who are pursuing STEM careers. So thank you all for being here with us today. So I want to start our conversation today by just mentioning the concept of identity. We all have several identities. Some of them are constant and some may change throughout your life. But we all have a primary identity, the one that we may think about when we first walk into the room, or the one we think about when we're first introducing ourselves to someone, such as gender, it could be ethnicity or nationality. And these are really core aspects of one's sense of self. You may also have secondary identities, which contribute to your overall identity, but may not be central to your sense of self and could change over time. These are things such as your occupation, hobbies, interests, things like that. Our identity can shape how we experience the world, our lived experiences, and at the same time, these lived experiences shape our identities. So in a personal statement, you'd want to start or want to talk about your scholarly identity. And your scholarly identity is your sense of self in relation to your research interests and your academics. So now I'd like to turn it over to Mahnoor and Elijah. Mahnoor, you can start us off to talk about the significance of finding that scholarly identity. Why is it important to find your why? And how do you self-reflect to find your why? And then how does this play out in a personal statement?
It's awesome to get to be in this space on today, and particularly this aspect of the student journey. Because when you're preparing to write a personal statement or a research statement or anything that's going to represent you in the written language, it is so important for you to have done the deep work first. There is a quote that I would like to read. It says, "And men go abroad to admire the heights of mountains, the mighty waves of the sea, the broad tides of rivers, the compass of the ocean, and the circuits of the stars, yet pass over the mystery of themselves without a thought." We are wonders as human beings. Another poet said, "I am vast, I contain multitudes." With this being the reality of what it means to be a human, before you write any statement, personal statement, any kind of research, you have to ask the question, who am I? And I know it sounds real cheeky, it sounds real trite, maybe even, but it is a legitimate question. Who am I? If I am vast and I contain multitudes, if I'm a complex, mysterious, fascinating being, how do I convey that? First of all, before I convey it, do I know it? Do I know it? Or do I see myself as one dimensional? Do I see myself as just a future chemist or as a bookworm or as an anime geek? Or do I just see myself one dimensionally? Do I just see myself racially or by gender or by nationality? Do I even only identify myself really as high achieving? I've just always been the smart kid. I'm the smart kid in class. Um, Without really sitting with that and saying, what does this actually mean? What do I like? Why do I like it? Where does it come from? All of those sorts of questions. We know that Socrates said, know thyself. We know that there are plenty of philosophers throughout the history of mankind that have focused on this. What have you done to really explore who you are, right? So after all this headiness, right, I love jumping into, and it's corny. I know many of the psychologists out there would probably say, oh my God, no, no, no. But to just begin the journey, I really do love doing personality tests, right? So doing a Myers-Briggs test, 16 personalities. I'm a big Enneagram fan. I don't know if there are any Enneagram people out there, but I'm Enneagram 1. In integration, I look like a 7. Disintegration, I look like a 4, right? I know what that sounds esoteric in a way, right? I know what that means because I've taken the time to explore myself. If I know that I am EN and ENTJ, right? I know what that means because I've taken the time. So there are so many tools out there. Start somewhere, even if they're the silly, I don't know if BuzzFeed is still a thing anymore. Maybe, I don't know, right? But I was a big BuzzFeed test. So it's like, what kind of cheese best represents me? I would do all of these things because I really wanted to take the time to say, how would I describe myself creatively if somebody said, what kind of cheese am I? What? How do I describe myself? Am I like a brie because I'm soft? Wait, what? Wait, what is this? And it sounds silly and it sounds ridiculous, but these are ways that we explore ourselves. Because when it's time for you to communicate about yourself, about your research interests, about your motivations for research, your motivations for anything that you do, you cannot do it authentically and you cannot do it creatively. Because remember, all of you all are going to pursue opportunities that there are tons of other people pursuing as well. And everybody's always looking for that edge. How do I differentiate myself? How do I make myself unique? Because this is how. Because you are a unique being, if you don't sit with yourself, sit with your family history, sit with your personal story, sit with these things, journaling, right? Talking to people that have known you since you were a baby, talking to people who have been in your family's life for generations. If you don't sit with these things, you may think that you are an awesome engineer because that's just what you do until you sit with your grandpa's best friend and you find out, wait, your grandpa used to do these same things. Wait a minute, you're not doing anything that this is multiple generations of people that like to tinker and break apart and deconstruct and reconstruct. And you thought that's a story. That's an amazing story. That's a legacy, right? But you don't know that unless you dedicate yourself to exploring this question, who am I? It's a big question, and it's one question that we will be asking ourselves for a lifetime. I pass it to my colleague.
Thank you, Elijah, for getting us started. And I love this question of who am I, because it helps us build some intention into how we want to operate and what we want to build upon, whether it is our skill set, whether it is our impact, whether it is designing our future by intention. So I appreciate bringing intentionality into this space. A few different things as my colleague was speaking, and also as I had taken some notes that I like to reflect on for personal statements, for interviewing skills, for interactions, whether it's with people we know already, with new people, and also as a process as you are thinking about no matter what your path is, personally, professionally, as you are identifying what it is that you want to do that builds some purpose into your life and is meaningful for you as a professional pathway. I think it's really important to consider and cannot emphasize, as Elijah already has said, the power of reflection. For some people that regularly journal, they know what this is. But journaling is just one way to do that. There are many other activities that help us hold a mirror to ourselves and have a greater understanding about ourselves, whether it's emotional awareness, whether it is awareness of our skill sets. And sometimes, folks can be very dismissive of, I was thinking of what kind of cheese you are, but there are many other assessments out there that are equally valuable. And whenever I think of the phrase "Who am I?" As you were also kind of referencing, Elijah, it takes me back to Zoolander. I'm aging myself, but the main character in the film is looks in a puddle of water and just says "Who am I?" and it's a reckoning moment. And we are a combination of our experiences, and we have continued opportunities to change and build. Right. So if you take an assessment and it says your strength in this particular moment in time, right? Because all of these surveys, these assessments are snapshots of who you are right now. It says that you have a lot of strengths in the intellectual area. That doesn't mean that you can't build strengths in the influencer area, or it doesn't mean that you can build strengths as a communicator or as an organizer. So I like to remind people that when you are doing these self-reflections as you are composing either a personal statement again, or setting up for an interview, or again, reflecting on what your purpose needs to be, what pathway you need to choose, always remember that you are continuing to build and grow. You are not at a dead end. These are my finite skill sets for the rest of my life. This is where you are reflecting and choosing intentionally, how do I want to build, right? So if I don't have a particular type of skill set, what can I do to learn more about it, right? So always kind of approaching it with that model. Something that I like to remind our students, so as Jane introduced us, I'm at the Bloomberg School of Public Health at Johns Hopkins University, and our graduate students are studying primarily public health and biomedical sciences, and generally come in with an interest in serving populations have better life outcomes. So there's definitely a very core value of service to humanity and contributing to the betterment of life and population health goals. So I like to remind students, okay, that is your core purpose. What are different ways in which you can lead? So going off of what Elijah had shared about learning more about yourself, I would offer that even with all the expertise, even with all the professional experiences and engagements that you have been involved in and will be involved in, people keep coming back to soft skills. And so do not take that lightly. So when someone is up for tenure and there's a conversation about, they're excellent because they've done this and they've published this and they've accomplished this, people also come back to, how that person communicates effectively. What are their conflict resolution skills? How do they lead in different spaces? How do they make people feel as a team member or, other member of the community? So seek out opportunities that help you build those skills and reflect on what you have built so far. So there are many lenses in which you can lead. So you can lead from an identity-based leadership lens, where you are doing critical self-reflections of your social identities, considering your impact, considering both your privileged identities as well as lived experiences, and also the way in which intersectionality plays out in different contexts, right? And what are some spaces in which you have marginalized identities, and what is that interplay, right? So I like to offer that we often lean into our marginalized identities because we might be in spaces where we are constantly reminded of those, but we also share a great deal of privilege as a group. We're all in this technological space right now here in a shared Zoom. We have some level of access to technology. We're all speaking in English and understanding each other, or there's an expectation that we are understanding each other. We're all part of different educational institutions. Higher education is indeed a privilege. Not everyone across the country is pursuing degrees. So just kind of, reflecting on our identities in a thoughtful manner, in a holistic manner. Another way to lean into learning more about yourself and continuing to grow is reflecting on your values. So a lot of people will speak of how they are value-based leaders or they lead from a value lens. So learning more about what your values are, your core personal and professional values, which may also shift and change as you go through life in different experiences. And that is okay because being static is never good for a leader. So thinking about what are your values that can help shape the type of personal statement that you're writing or the type of professional pathway that you are choosing. Also reflecting on your emotional awareness. I mentioned communication style, conflict resolution style. All of these soft skills are really your strengths, understanding what are my strengths, what is my critical identity reflection, how often do I think about the impact of my words and actions. All of these things are really important because the cumulative effect of knowing yourself is that whatever space that you are in, you are causing minimal harm, hopefully, through your actions and really leading with your strengths and helping other people lead with their strengths as well. So I would say to get us started, these are just some of the things that you should be considering. And you could take any one of these things as you are thinking about critical identity reflection or what are your values or what are your strengths and connect that to your lived experiences, how those things have helped shape your lived experiences or how your lived experiences have helped shaped your strengths and your values. So I will pause here and turn it over back to you, Jane.
Let me just jump in real quick because I think one of the things that has been said and I think is so important, this word intentionality, I think is a very important word because as you explore self, the multidimensional, mysterious, amazing self that you have, you will have to discern. You will have to discern what will be shared and what will not be shared. You will have to discern and strategically express because you will discover parts of you that are so precious and sacred and vulnerable that you may not want to put them out there for this particular audience. It's for a different venue, it's for a different setting. And so intentionality matters because when you are discovering the good, bad, and ugly about who you are going to frame it in a way that is going to accomplish the task at hand. So if we're talking about preparing for graduate school or preparing for the next level, because if we are going to intentionally build something, then that means we have boundaries. and we have something that is going to tell us yes, this, no to that, yes, 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 no, yes, no, yes, no. And that discernment, we have to remember every single word that we put on a page matters. Every single article, every single conjunction, preposition, every noun, every verb, every piece of punctuation has meaning. And so our careful attention to those things shows that we have carefully attended to this matter of who we are. And I think if there's one word that you walk away from all of this with, it is that word intentionality. Being into, thank you, Kali, for that word. Intentionality is going to make the difference. That's all I want to say.
Thank you both so much for the insight and the framing. I did want to say that we can post some of the self-reflection or self-assessment tools that you mentioned. I haven't even heard of them. What kind of cheese? That's a new one. And the ideagram, is it? Yeah. So thanks for introducing me to those, and I'll share those with our students. Okay, so next we are going to kind of get more into the nitty-gritty of crafting a strong personal statement, and I'm going to hand it over to Chenere to talk about tips for crafting a strong personal statement.
All right. Hello, everybody. I put together a slide with some bullet points that I'm going to share. There are some notes that accompany this slide that will be posted into the Google Classroom for you to access later. So you don't have to worry about taking down notes because I can speak kind of quickly. I'll try to go slowly, but don't worry about taking down notes. So first is, on the tip side, is to determine and explain your rationale for applying. So what I mean by that is, before you begin to write, you want to take a moment to deeply connect with your true motivations for applying to the program or opportunity. Your reasons should reflect a passion for learning and a thorough understanding of what you are pursuing. For example, rather than simply applying to the University of Pennsylvania neuroscience program, which is where I went to school, because of its stellar reputation, you might say something like, Parkinson's disease personally impacts my family, sparking my interest in studying it. So I discovered a groundbreaking paper from Dr. Virginia Lee's lab at Penn Center for Neurodegenerative Disease, and her team's discovery about the alpha-synuclein protein in Lewy body pathology captivated me, especially given the mystery surrounding its function despite its ubiquitous presence. I'm eager to explore why proteins aggregate in Parkinson's disease patients' brains, and I'm thrilled about the prospect of collaborating with pioneering researchers like those in the Lee Lab to tackle such crucial questions. So you can show what your rationale is for applying by, giving more details about the institution, the research that they offer, without just saying, I like neuroscience and I want to apply to Penn because it's a great school or something like that. The next thing is to tell your unique story. So your statement, you have to think about the fact that you're competing with hundreds of other applicants. And it's crucial that you want to stand out, right, by highlighting unique aspects of your relevant experiences. And I say relevant experiences. So you want to aim to capture the admissions committee's attention with a personal and genuine narrative, because it's not a general statement, it's a personal statement. And then you want to, I say this to my students all the time, show me, don't tell me. So what I mean by that is, rather than explicitly listing your past achievements or values, you want to offer anecdotal examples that allow the reader to infer your accomplishments and priorities. So a well-told story will convey these elements effectively and create a more engaging narrative. For example, instead of saying, I learned PCR, which is polymerase chain reaction for those who are not in the molecular biology field, and have given oral presentations at 3 conferences. That will be an example of listing things you've done. You could say, in my recent semester, I took a molecular biology course that included a semester-long project. And I've always been interested in hair health, particularly how mutating specific cysteine residues in keratin protein affects hair texture. And after learning polymerase chain reaction techniques in the classroom, I performed site-directed mutagenesis on the mouse keratin protein, sequenced my PCR products, and subcloned them into a mammalian expression vector. Although I haven't tested my constructs yet, I won first place poster award after sharing my work at our school student symposium. So that gives insight into the fact that you've learned PCR, but also shows what you've done with what you learned, as well as it gives some insight into your interest. So show me, don't just tell me. You also want to stick to the most relevant details. So the personal statement should weave a cohesive narrative, meaning that everything you say should somehow be connected. And you want to ensure that every element contributes to the overarching story that you wish to convey. So even when addressing seemingly unrelated experiences, you want to try to strategically frame them to highlight connections and illustrate a unified professional trajectory. And you also do not want to assume what the reader knows. A lot of people do this. You want to refrain from using abbreviations or acronyms without clarification. So typically I would say you spell out the abbreviation the first time and then you can use it thereafter to take up less space. But you have to recognize that all admissions committee members do not have necessarily the same background. They may not necessarily be from your particular discipline. So they may not know, So they may not necessarily know everything that you know. So it's never a good idea to assume. So, especially when it relates to things like protein names and functions of proteins, biochemical pathways, drug names, etc., you want to definitely kind of give like a one-sentence blurb of background about those things, because you want to ensure that your personal statement is self-contained and you want to avoid the need for external references. The next thing is be specific to each program. You want to be specific to each program. So while certain elements of your personal statement will remain consistent, you want to ensure that each statement contains specific aspects that are tailored to demonstrate how your experiences and interests align with the mission of the particular program and how it supports your academic and career objectives. Additionally, you must carefully read and understand and address the specific requirements and questions posed by the program. So you don't want to just send a generic statement to every program. And then you want to make sure you state your short and long-term goals. State what you hope to accomplish while you participate in the program or opportunity. And then you want to state how the program or opportunity will be instrumental in helping you fulfill your long-term goals, and be specific. So when applying to graduate school, it's obvious that you're aiming to earn a degree. So there's no need to mention that. Instead, you want to discuss goals like the specific scientific questions you want to explore as a graduate student, the national conferences where you plan to present your work, or your aspirations to publish in particular journals. Those are some examples of ways that you can express goals that you have. And while admissions committees understand that your goals may evolve, sharing your specific objectives shows foresight. So it's okay if your goals change, but you just want to have some, basically, and you want to put those in your statement. And then when it relates to your long-term goals, you should be more career focused. Whether you aspire to be a professor or work in industry or secure a government role, the key is to connect the program's training to your long-term goals and make sure that you're specific about that. And then it may be obvious, but it's not always practiced by students. You want to give yourself adequate time. Avoid procrastinating when you're drafting your personal statement. Allow ample time for receiving feedback and making necessary revisions before submission. I always tell students, give yourself no less than a month to craft your personal statement, because if you want to get feedback, which we'll address in a second, you want to give your professors and whoever is going to be helping you revise it, you want to give them time, because people can be busy. So not everybody's like me. Oftentimes I'll get something and then I have 1 day or 2 days to help someone before it's time to submit it. and I will stay up all night and do that, but not everybody can do that. So you don't want to put people in those positions to have to rush. And you also want to get a lot of feedback. So it's essential to seek feedback on your personal statement from at least 2 people, I would say, at least 2 people. And ideally, they should have some expertise in your field of interest. You want to consider reaching out to your research mentor, your academic advisor, favorite professors, and even your peers can be helpful in giving you feedback. Additionally, a lot of institutions have a career center that can offer valuable guidance. And I didn't know that this was available to me. And I went to a conference and talked about, it was an NIH sponsored conference at the NIH. And I talked about how I needed help with, I can't remember now, I think it was a postdoc application. And the person presenting was like, Penn has an awesome career center. Like, and then I found out it was true. So it's important that you're aware of the resources that your school has to offer. And many career centers will provide complimentary one-on-one consultations to assist you with your personal statement revisions. So take advantage of that if you have it. And there are other resources that can help you. So you want to consult other helpful resources. In addition to the Career Center, there's numerous published and online resources available to assist you in writing your personal statement. And in the notes that I provide, I do list a few of those resources with the links to those. And then there are a few mistakes you want to avoid. So first of all is dishonesty. If you don't showcase your real interests and motivations, you might find yourself in a program that doesn't truly fit your needs. So don't just say what you think they want to hear. Be honest about what you want to do, because if the program is not a good fit for you, it's better for you to find that out before you actually get accepted and go somewhere. So it's just best to be honest. Additionally, seasoned reviewers on admissions committees can spot insincerity, and that could harm your credibility and hurt your chances of getting accepted. So keep it real for the best results. The second thing to avoid is controversial statements. So unless it directly relates to your motivation for entering the program or your academic goals and or career interests, you want to avoid mentioning controversial or polarizing subjects. So religion, politics, race, and current buzzwords like DEI, unfortunately, that's become a curse word. If you must include such content, you want to do so in a scholarly way by citing data that reflects the same message that you're trying to convey. So for example, instead of saying something like, well, everybody knows that a lot of Native Americans don't do well in science, you could say, based on the survey of earned doctorates, data collected by the NSF between the years of 2000 to 2023, those who self-identify as Native American or Alaskan consistently earn less than 0.5% of all the science and engineering research doctorate degrees awarded annually, while this same group composes about 1% of the US population based on the 2020 US Census data. And so that says the same thing, but it's objective, irrefutable, and then you want to provide the references, of course, for anything that you cite, or anything that you mention, any data that you mention. And then you want to avoid plagiarism. A lot of these things should go without saying, but those of us who have served on admissions committees know that these are some mistakes that people make. So by plagiarism, I mean, do not copy sample personal statements found online or in books. Do not submit a personal statement written by someone else as your own. That also would probably affect the honesty portion or the dishonesty portion. Do not reword someone else's ideas or experiences without proper acknowledgement. Do not use quotations or ideas from articles, books, or lectures without citing the source. So, try to avoid those things. And I know in the time of artificial intelligence and, these tools that can write stuff for us, you might be tempted to use that, but there are some schools that have software that can detect if you've used artificial intelligence, and there's some people who have a lot of experience recognizing when something has been written by an artificial intelligent assistant. So, avoid that. And then last, I put a lecturing tone, because you want to remember that this is not meant to be an editorial or opinion piece, but rather a thoughtful reflection of your academic interests, experiences, and aspirations. So avoid lecturing the reader. Try to avoid putting too much of your opinion in there, or telling them something like, well, I believe that whatever you believe. You want to avoid writing it in that way and stick to making objective statements that can be confirmed with data. So that completes everything I wanted to say about that. And I will stop sharing my screen and send this back to Jane.
I'm going to move into the Q&A portion of our session. And we got several questions along the lines of this one that I will read. How do you share your experiences in a genuinely and humbly, in a humble way, without coming off as boasting or making it seem like you're bragging? So how do you stay authentic when you're writing a statement?
I think if you don't just rattle off your accomplishments, as I said to avoid doing anyway, it won't sound like you're bragging. And it's okay to brag about the things that you've accomplished, because you do want to bring those things to the forefront, especially if you won awards or anything really good, publish a paper. But you want to try to say it in an anecdotal way. Like I said, tell a story, as opposed to just saying, oh, I'm the best one ever in my school. I'm at the top of my class. And, just repeatedly focusing on your accomplishments that they can see in your curriculum vitae or resume. And to be authentic, only you know what's authentic to you. Nobody else will know whether or not you're being honest. So just, dig deep. And when you're writing, make sure that what you're conveying is what you truly feel, that you're being genuine. That's how I would.
I think to add to that, I mean, I may be, correct me, colleagues. I personally don't mind a little bit of a brag, because it says that what you did mattered to you. You weren't just doing things just to do them, or collecting accomplishments just to collect them, but these things matter to you. So sharing it in a way that helps the reader understand the importance of this accomplishment, whether it be because, maybe you're first generation, or, because, this is a part of your family legacy, or because you really thought you couldn't do it and the odds were stacked against you, but you did it. Like, those kinds of reasons to share help us understand the fuller story of who you are. And so there is nothing wrong, because ultimately you are making the case for why you are a vibrant potential candidate to be a part of this great community that you're wanting to be a part of. So you're going to graduate school, you're going wherever, and you're making the case for what you will add to a potential community. And you can't make that case being shy or being coy. This is the honest truth about who we are. But just like Dr. Ramsey said, there's lots of things that are already on your CV or resume, so there's no need to put it in the same, unless there is some context that adds dimension to this accomplishment or to this research opportunity that you were a part of. So if it adds dimension and it adds context, then I think that is very useful and very purposeful, and won't come off as braggadocious if is crafted as a part of an authentic narrative of who you are.
I just wanted to quickly add and reiterate, I agree with what Dr. Ramsey and Elijah have shared. Again, if it's on your resume, there has to be a reason why you're including it and referencing it again. If there's additional context like that has been shared, or you are offering further detail, or more importantly, if you're talking about, what was stated earlier about a strong personal statement, if you're talking about this XYZ experience that is on the resume, but these are my learnings and this is my future aspiration on how to apply these learnings or continue to grow in this way, and that is the reason I want to be in your program, I think that is relevant. But regurgitating what is already on the resume, you're wasting important, precious space that you could be using to tell a more stronger narrative about yourself and your potential. Yeah.
So I know that you've all read personal statements, statements of purpose. So what are some, I guess, strategies or things that have stood out to you in those? Um, and in thinking about your own statements that you've written, what have you tried to focus on to stand out?
I
I
would,
guess, yeah, that's the
yeah,
question. How do you stand apart from all the others?
I would love to jump in this because I think I've seen, because I serve both STEM students and humanities and social science scholars. I've gotten to see a little bit of everything, and particularly for STEM kids, I've seen a couple kids who are applying for the GEM fellowship, who are applying for PhD work right out of undergrad at top tier institutions. And what I was very impressed with, particularly with STEM kids, is where they were able to naturally and organically demonstrate an interdisciplinarity that isn't as common, right? And so I remember one student he beautifully wove in his love for quantum physics, Langston Hughes, and material science, and it all met in this beautiful intersection. And that for me was so unique and so brilliant for somebody applying for a PhD material science program at a top tier institution. And we worked like crazy on that. This wasn't just a throw together kind of thing, but the fact that he was able to bring his full self into this statement without compromising who he was as an emerging scientist. And I think that caused his application. And I think of one other person who did something similar. That caused their applications to stand out, and both have gone on to amazing institutions and are in their first year of PhD programs. But I look at their statements, and for STEM people, I know that the line gets very like there is a line, right? There is a line. And I think understanding um how to be within that line of being relevant as a scientist, yet also still showing um your other interests and the other things that would make you an even more valuable scientist because of the different lenses that you're able to see the world through. And so I think for me personally, I've seen those kinds of statements be highly successful.
Try to do some research about the institution or the program you're applying for, because different institutions have different personalities and the faculty at those institutions have different personalities. At some institutions, they may not really care about interests outside of, science. And I'm speaking about science because that's what I know. Because I'm a musician. And when I was applying for neuroscience programs, at the time I was thinking about looking into tone deafness and trying to understand the neuroscience aspect of tone deafness. But once I got to my program, while there were a lot of people who had diverse interests outside of science, sometimes it can be perceived that you're not focused. So it just depends where you're applying. And you may want to tailor what you say. You definitely want to tailor what you say to the institution, but it may affect what you choose to share to stand out. Like some places may want you to focus solely on the scientific things you've done and where your head is surrounding what you plan on doing with the what you've learned, and just be very, very focused on data and science. Other places may really appreciate, like Dr. Bratton just said, that you can think in an interdisciplinary way, maybe bring some arts into it, science, and put it together. There's also a different way to think about being interdisciplinary because, say, like neuroscience is a very interdisciplinary field. There are people that are doing cognitive neuroscience. There are people doing neurobiology of disease, which is what I do. There are people that do computational neuroscience, and they're very different. So even the ability to know how to marry those things together. But, you know, I would say to think about that, as well as telling a story makes your statement stand out. It's way more interesting to read someone talking about, you know, their rationale for wanting to go into this and sharing personal facts from their background, that align with that rationale. And then for each of the things they've learned, if they care to share, you know, their research experiences, to talk about why this was important and what they plan on doing with what they learned, instead of just saying, this is what I did and I like this because whatever. Giving more insight into the context of why this is something that you're interested in, will help your personal statement stand out.
No, I think that the power of, I love this, Dr. Ramsey, the power of a well-told story, oh my goodness. And I don't want anyone to get, I think you have to craft that in such a unique way, because what we're not saying is, oh, turn this into a fairy tale. So once upon a time, there was a little girl who, oh my gosh, I think if I saw that on a statement as somebody trying to tell a story and trying to be creative, and I think I would die, right? I just, no, that's not what we're saying, you know, crafting a story and being creative and all that. No. Don't do that. But just a well-told story. And maybe you should watch some people who tell stories well. Maybe you should listen to some great storytellers, because when you listen and you watch, for some of y'all who are church going, right? If you're church going and you listen to someone deliver a sermon and you just hear how they've told a story as a part of their sermon illustration, those sorts of things you can do on paper without it being, for lack of a better word, without it being corny. Without it being corny and unserious is probably a better word, because you never want to compromise your seriousness, though you can throw in humor and it still maintain a seriousness. You can throw in vulnerability and it still maintains seriousness, but you don't want to compromise that seriousness. But there is nothing in this universe like the power of a well-told story. I stand firm in it, and I echo Dr. Ramsey 10,000 times over for that, and figure out what that means in your context.
I just want to add, my colleagues have covered it all, and this is advice not just for personal statement, but also if you're thinking about more limited time opportunities like a quick meeting, informational meeting, interview, elevator pitches, things like that. You knowing your values, your strengths, your identity, you knowing yourself helps contribute to the power of your story. So I think all of that is all connected. I think going back and reflecting on what I try to remember, and as I am reading different applications, whether it's for our summer program or for other programs, just being mindful of not being pretentious and, in your narrative, remembering that just because you are using large and big words does not make your narrative more compelling. I say that because, I'm not saying that if you do use those words in your regular sort of speech, not to undermine that, but there are many times that when you are reading a statement and it's just kind of lost what the person is trying to say because it is overly pretentious, the word choice or the presentation of the story. So being mindful of that simplicity goes a long way. You don't need to, tone it down and make it, so palatable that, it's accessible for every type of reader. Certainly, if you are applying to school and, admissions reviews committees are looking at your materials, they have a certain level of expertise and lived experiences and professional experiences, but be mindful that, sometimes a simple narrative is very compelling and can be a nice change from reading things that are overly pretentious. So, simple language is perfectly acceptable if that is a compelling way to tell your story. Also, having some folks in your corner that know you and have served as advisors or friends or just know you personally really well. This could be a friend, this could be a colleague, this could be, someone in your family, someone or a peer that can offer a second set of eyes that knows you, might be able to say, hey, this is really great. Like you could talk about this as well, because, I know that this is a value for you or this experience that you had. And sometimes they can help us refine the story that we are telling in a way that is more personal, that perhaps like an external person can't offer you that type of feedback. So having a few people like that, and I agree with Dr. Ramsey's advice. You are so generous and your students are so lucky to have you, but most people are going to have hard boundaries around that, that, if you are doing a request, because this is not the only thing that they're doing, right? So we have to be respectful as well. So if you are asking someone to provide you feedback, also providing them ample time to provide you that feedback. So I just wanted to add a couple of those things that you cannot go wrong with a simple statement that is compelling in its own way. I also have a colleague who does a lot of reviews for medical school admissions, and she tells me that I think like 80 to 90% of personal statements start with, as a child, I went to the hospital and something happened and it changed my life. And I was 3 years old and I wanted to be a doctor. Or, my grandmother had heart disease and, that shifted our life and my family, and now I wanted to be a doctor. And that can be your truth. That can absolutely be your truth, that is what is motivating you. But just a reminder that if you're trying to stand out, like 80% of the people are starting their personal statements with that kind of language or example. So think about how you want to creatively talk about your motivation as well, because they hear that a lot.
We actually got several students in our Q&A box and submitting ahead of time, asking what the difference between a personal statement and a statement of purpose is. And I guess, what do grad school applications usually ask for?
I've seen different graduate programs ask for a myriad of things. It really is program specific. It just is. And there, even apart from personal statement, research statement, there are other kinds of statements that they are looking for applicants to craft. So I want to speak into that. I really believe it is program. And even I'm going to be honest, and my colleagues, please correct me if you've seen differently. I really believe that today, 2025, the difference between the purpose statement and the personal statement and statement of purpose oftentimes is a very narrow difference. It's a very nuanced difference. Oftentimes you are sharing much of the same content in a different way or in a different context or from a different angle. And so it does feel like for some students, like they're repeating themselves, because like, for instance, I always let students know, even in the personal statement, this is not a time to write your autobiography, but this is you're still making the case for who you are as a researcher. And so no matter which way you slice it, be it the personal statement, the statement of purpose, the research statement, the whatever, central to this is who you are as a researcher, who you are as an emerging scholar. And because of that, some of the information may be told on those same pages differently in different ways for different reasons. But I'll definitely defer to my colleagues on that.
Pay attention to the details, the instructions in the application, read them very carefully. And I think, not only giving those who are reading your essay to give you feedback, but also give yourself enough time or a lot of time to sit with what you write and to review it.
There are some institutions, to what our colleague Mahnoor said here, there are some institutions that will, I mean, yes, you should ask the program, the admissions team and the program team how they differentiate it, but a lot of schools will have somewhere in their website, they will have a definition of what they want for those things. If you go to Yale or to Harvard or to any of those websites and you just put in, purpose statement, statement of research, whatever, they oftentimes have, even in their writing centers, that they have the information online. They will have it there, what they mean by personal statement, what they mean by research, and how they differentiate it. And so in addition to, because many of them, thank you, colleague, for this, many programs do use these terms interchangeably. So for one institution, they have a very clear difference between the two. Another institution, they literally mean the same thing. And a third institution, there's a whole twist on that you had no idea. So it really, I can't overemphasize, both colleagues, or all three have said it at some point in time, but there is nothing that will replace you studying the institution that you're applying to. That combing through everything, their website, combing through the alumni page, combing through every aspect of that program, who the professors are, what they've been researching, the awards that they've won, where they've been published, understanding that program to a T is going to make the world of difference, including understanding the difference between how they use these terms.
And that can take a lot of time doing that kind of background homework, but it really is worth it at the end of the day. It really is. So it's actually hard to believe that we're already at the top of the hour. So does anyone have any parting advice or tips or words? And are you okay with me sharing your contact information in our Google Classroom, because we didn't get to many of the questions that were submitted. So in case somebody wants to ask you one of their questions.
Feel free to email me, students who have questions. And also part of what I do is help people to write and revise personal statements. So feel free to reach out to me and I'd be glad to offer my assistance on that.
Thank you.
I would lastly say I would definitely encourage, if you're going to work with someone who is skilled at this, that you figure out a way, either using your computer's features or whatever, get all of the punctuation and all of the technical aspects cleaned up first. Like don't let that be where the hangups are. When you sit with a human being that's going to help guide you through this, utilize the time well by being able to focus on the conceptual realities, the flow of ideas, these sorts of things, and not capitalization, punctuation. Like, you've got Grammarly, you've got spell check, you've got all these other features on your computer by now. Go ahead and get that out of the way on your own and actually capitalize on the time that you do sit with another skilled person that can guide you in ways that AI really can't. Definitely.
Well, with that, we'll wrap up. And please, students, join us again on Monday for another conversation with a doctoral scholar. And our next Wednesday workshop is all about storytelling. So please join us for that, which will be about storytelling in terms of talking about your research, communicating about your research. But I'm sure we can bring up the personal statements as well. All right. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.